1980s were a very interesting time for SLR camera manufacturers, and it was the time I bought my first single lens reflex film camera. And I remember looking at Canon, Olympus, Pentax and Minolta, and they all had similar cameras. And it was a time when things were going from manual to a little bit of automation, especially the thing called aperture priority. Automatic focusing had not come in at all at this time. I'm talking 1984, and I remember this coming into the shops, the Minolta x300. Beforehand they had been I think it was a 507, which had manual and automatic on, and this followed that. And what we have is a manual focusing camera. We have, I'm going to check that there's no film in this camera. We can do that by, yeah, So film goes in here, over to here, and we have a cloth focal plane shutter here. On the top of the camera, we have a little bit of a different design from the Pentax of the time, but it has a little similarity. Instead of having on the Nikon bringing out the lever, or on some cameras half pressing the shutter, on here we have an on-off switch. There are advantages and disadvantages of the on-off switch. The advantages is it's a very clear, clean system. The disadvantage is you can leave the camera on. I think it switches off after a bit, but I can't quite remember on that. So you've got on-off there. Your shutter button is here. We have the counter here, and here is your shutter speed, which you change at the front here. This will change your shutter speed. So let me see if I can get that clearly in your, there we are. So I can change from now auto is aperture priority, and if I'm on auto I can change my shutter and I can change my aperture, and the camera will automatically choose a shutter speed for me. So if I focused and then have it on auto, by changing my aperture, the camera will automatically select the correct shutter speed. In manual mode, I can have whatever shutter speed I want. So let's say I want 250 or 12. If I want to 125, I set it there, and then by changing my aperture, I will then, in the viewfinder, I will get an arrow when indicator, a little red LED by the selected 125 when it's correct, if that makes sense. There's a little meter going up and down in the viewfinder, so just move it until it meets in the viewfinder. There's an electronic self timer at the front there. You set your ISO here, and that is basically it. These cameras have a lot of advantages, I think. They are reliable, they were nicely made, the lenses are really good lenses, but the electronic cameras of the 80s are beginning to have a couple of issues, and this camera just does have one issue. But if you and that issue is the capacity capacitor. There's a capacitor in here, and I'm not going to do a video now on changing the capacitor, but it is possible if you buy one of these and the shutter is just not operating and the meter is not operating, it is very much possible that it's the capacitor, and there are some online videos on changing the capacitor. But getting back to the camera, you can get it in chrome. This is obviously a black bodied camera, and it's in nice condition. The lens is the Minolta fit, it's the Minolta bayonet, and you simply change it by this button here. Line up the red, and there we go. Let's see how the camera performed when I actually took it out. It was another sunny day when I went to Wareham in Dorset, and it had been raining quite heavily, but it was a good opportunity to test the Minolta, and the lens, as you can see, is nice and sharp. The exposures on the whole were good, though I got one or two where it seemed to do slightly daft things, but as you can see, this view of the church here, good range of tones, and the lens, as I said, is as sharp as anything. This camera reminded me, it was a bit like a time warp back to the 1980s and using a manual camera, because obviously you have to focus, there's no automatic focusing, and the automation is really only on the aperture side, where you choose the aperture and the camera selects the shutter speed for you. I quite like using it in manual, because with manual you get an indication of the exposure, but if you've specifically after a certain effect, or you've got lots of shadows here and you want to expose for the books, you can basically work out what you want to do. And again, really crisp here. I had forgotten how good this Minolta lens is. Hate to say it, but I think it's almost as good as my Nikon lens. This camera is a really nice camera to use. The only odd thing is, after using it, it then decided that the capacitor wouldn't work properly, and I had exposure issues, but not when taking this film. When I was using the camera in Wareham, it was as good as gold. I really enjoyed using it. It was a lovely afternoon, and the shadows are really nice and deep. It must have been about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and about the 24th-ish of October, so the light was getting, that time of year. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.